Oops. So the next chapter is called Visible Bruises and Prior Gastritis, and it deals with some of the things that she's dealing with. Specifically, it's an examination, exploration of her being in an abusive relationship, and also it deals with the fear she has in dealing with sort of the more social aspects of school. And again, this is something she addresses as a concern that young women face, that that going out and partying can be dangerous, and she also that fear increases because she's a woman of color. That the fears that young women have when entering the social scene is there, and then with the added sort of anti-Black racism she's experiencing, it's heightened as well. Okay. Again, that link is to listen to a previous breakdown of this I did last year. Well, not last year, 2020, in the first quad. So if you have an interesting, if you want to listen to that, as well as this, please click on that just for additional information. So this chapter deals with attorney recounts being in an abusive relationship, specifically with her mate, her boyfriend, Joshua. The chapter takes place, this chapter takes a different tone. Now, normally, this is a nonfiction book, so it's pretty straightforward. It's a memoir or autobiography, where she's kind of expressing what happens during the day, and then she gives you some statistics and facts about how that's similar to things that others have expressed. This one specifically, she writes it in a more literary, poetic tone, and exploring the relationship between the two of them. She makes a connection between love and control, and she talks about it as an aspect that she has to deal with. She also has to deal with the pain dealing with her boyfriend's anti-Black racism, right? And the fact that, again, Joshua is Asian, and dealing with some of the tension that she feels she gets from him on that aspect, right? That the thing that she ends up feeling bad about for being identifying as a Black woman, seeing as a Black woman. While she is Asian, that Joshua tends to denigrate her Black side, her Black heritage. Okay. You can read this on pages 79 to 80 that deals with the idea of control and love. Okay, so she discusses not seeing signs of him being a possessive violent man. This is on pages 83 to 84. And she played the role, and if she played a role in this toxic relationship. Now, this is a very interesting thing that she does here. She does not, she's not giving excuses for Joshua's behavior. This is not the purpose of this. It might be interpreted as that, but she's not doing that. What she's trying to explore is that, is there a role she plays in perpetuating this idea of a toxic relationship? And she simply says, she knows that he's a possessive man, yet she would do things that she knew that would get him angry. And is she doing these things because she wants that response from him? And is she playing a role in this relationship because she gets something out of it as well on some level? Now, again, this is not saying that she is guilty of encouraging Joshua to be violent with her. That's not the case, or abusive to her. That's not the case. That's on Joshua. But she is saying, what role does we all play in toxic relationships? And think of it like almost like when we read Streetcar Named Desire, the Stanley Stella thing, that there is this kind of weird interdependency between them, that the more crazier or violent Stanley gets, the more Blanche feels, the more Stella feels protected. So, Stanley still needs Stella to be there, because if she's not there, he loses control. He feels worthless. So it's this kind of weird thing that she says she might have played a role in. And again, it's meant to be nuanced. It's not meant to victim blame. And I think it's a really interesting part of the book that when you're reading, you should really think about in that exploration, right? She's simply saying, am I looking for this? Now, this is interesting because later on in the book, when she's talking about her father and relationship with her father and in relation with all men she's had, she kind of comes to a realization that maybe part of the choices she makes and the partner she chooses in a relationship has to deal with this idea of a man rejecting her, right? And her seeking that man to love her, right? And again, Joshua's possessiveness can play a role in this on some level, right? That he's an imperfect man she's trying to get to love and acknowledge her and treat her in a certain way. And again, we'll read more, we read in the book, it kind of comes back to that, but I think it's something that's always within our head and something that's an aspect of Attorney's personality. Okay, it also talks about the fact that when he becomes abusive, she faces the stereotype that as a Black woman, she can handle herself and fight back. This is pages 85 to 86. So the myth is that Black people don't break, that Black people are strong, that Black women do not get physically abused. They fight back, they push back. And again, it's something that she addresses as part of this detrimental aspect to examining the role or the issues that Black women face, right? It's the idea that people of color don't seek help, mental help or support, that they should be able to handle it on their own and they don't need anyone around them they can just deal with situations themselves. So she talks about the fact that she feels shame that she's in a abusive relationship. When she tells people, their attitude is that you should be able to handle him because he's a skinny little Asian kid, what's the big deal? And then she then goes into depression further because she's saying, I should be able to handle this, but I'm not. And she's not seeking help or support professionally how to end this relationship. So it's this weird cycle, right? When she's assaulted and abused, no one believes her. This is on pages 90 to 91, discusses the concept of the ideal victim. And again, this is interesting. We can see the links between some of the books we're reading, right? Because we talked about the fact that there are people who look at the relationship between, in the play, Blanche as responsible for the rape she endures because she's not the ideal victim. She's a woman who has had sex, has numerous relationships. She's a liar. She's not the most, she can be biased. She can be racist. So when something happens to her, we think, well, she's probably doing this. She's probably involved. She somehow created the environment for this to happen. She talks about it as that when she claims to be a victim, she's not what the ideal is. And again, when we think about victim and rape and abuse, we think of a woman being attacked by a stranger, all right? Clothes ripped, running out from the bushes while someone chases after her with a weapon or some sort, while she screams, I'm being assaulted or I'm being raped, right? That's an idea of the perfect victim, and Trinity doesn't fit that role, right? She seems like a pretty confident woman. She seems like she's in a relationship of her choosing. And the fact that she is in this and doesn't know her way out and is sort of dealing with this, there's a lack of understanding or the idea that she somehow can get out of the situation without support. So she's delving to the ideas of victims, and we don't feel comfortable with victims unless victims fit a very specific role versus the more complex and nuanced idea that victims can be anything. To go off a little bit of a tangent, there was a man named John Gameshi who was an employee of the CBC. He had a radio show. He was a commentator. He worked for many organizations at CBC. And about 5 years ago, he quit his job or was fired from his job because there were allegations of him assaulting women. Now, during this time, when this came out, and again, this was also the time of other famous men being accused of assault, the idea was that people, especially with Gian Gameshi, some of the women that he assaulted, said that they went out with him, he did something weird, he choked them and hit them, and they went out with him the very next day. And the idea was that people said, well, why are you dating the guy again? If he was so mean and rude and assaulted you, why would you do it again? And a lot of those women were talking about the fact that they didn't know what to do. They thought that they had maybe done something to set him off, and they can just probably talk to him and work it out and figure out, what did they do to make him act this way, instead of examining the fact. So when those women said that, people said, well, they're not victims because they're not the idea. They didn't just run to the police, tell them. And the biggest issue was the discussion of the fact that, when people are assaulted, they act in peculiar ways. And sometimes the response of being assaulted isn't, how dare you assault me? It becomes, oh, I must have done something to get that, to encourage that assault. I need to make it better. Okay, so she also discusses party lifestyle and her friends, Taz, what they were into. This is in the second chapter about visible party gastritis. After Joshua, she both feared and wanted men. So she was going through this thing where she was afraid to date men, but at the same time, she wanted men. And again, it's a very interesting dynamic, but it's, again, this confusion that she's trying to understand. She chooses men are ones that are selfish and emotionally unavailable to protect herself. So she's starting to examine the fact that after Joshua, the men she chooses, she knows those men will not enter into a loving relationship. They are going to be selfish. They're going to be self-centered because she feels she can be with men, but not open herself up to the vulnerability of a close relationship once she fished with Josh, and how it went horribly wrong because Josh was abusive. Right? It talks about violence directed toward women on pages. It talks about violence directed towards her, all right, specifically on pages 108 to 107, and her ovalization as sexualization as a Black woman. So in these pages, she talks about basically that when she's out, she's targeted, right? She's when she doesn't respond to sexual advances, that those men can become really violent with her or threaten violence to her. And they believe that as a Black woman, she must be always up for sex, right? And so then it becomes a situation where men are treating her just as a sexual object, and then she's always ready to, and men pursue her because they figure sex with a Black woman must be really great. So it's the overall sexualization of Black men. She also notes the difference between her and Taz in their treatment, right? Taz is closer to European features and is treated better, what makes attorney feel more insecure. So because Taz is looks more traditionally South Asian, she has those features, more European features. She is treated, again, there's an idea that there's a different treatment in the pursuit of her. Her attorney is just this Black woman who's a sexual object, and they just men expect her just to, they'll flirt with her, she'll go to bed, have sex with them, and then they'll tell her to leave. So it makes her feel more insecure that every time she goes out, she feels that this pressure as, Taz's tag-along friend who is there just for men to grab and grope and do what they want. Well, Taz is the trophy to be pursued. Right? Causes Taz and her to grow apart. So by page 110, we're looking at the fact that these two women are starting to grow apart because Taz, she has a sheltered life, has had a sheltered life just as much as Eternity, but the difference here is because she's not necessarily getting the violent and angered approach that Eternity gets when she goes out. She's liking the attention, right? Even though these men are still kind of creepy and treating her still on some level, still wanting something from her, it's much nicer than what Eternity gets. When Eternity tries to point out this thing, Taz is probably thinking, well, I kind of like the attention. I kind of like all this information directed towards me. So she starts to develop a fear of going out, and it's also connected to the death of Trayvon Martin. And if you don't know who Trayvon Martin is, that's a story that happened about 4 or 5 years ago. Trayvon Martin was a young Black man who was walking in a community that was considered to be gated, or in Florida, which means it's a community where there are sort of gates, or it's sort of separated, or gates that prevent people from entering into these sort of cul-de-sac communities. And he was walking around, and this man named George Zimmerman saw him and thought he didn't belong. And he called the police, to tell them, and they said, please don't bother him, leave him alone. And then George Zimmerman felt that this man was a threat. He went up to him, he confronted him. Trayvon was upset, and then George Zimmerman shot him, claiming that he was defending himself. Trayvon had no weapon, he had skills in his pocket, and George Zimmerman was acquitted of the assault because of the belief that he said that Trayvon's presence, if Trayvon was threatening him, that they got into a fight, and then Zimmerman felt fear for his life and therefore shot him. Even though George Zimmerman is not a police officer or security, he felt the need to confront someone, even though the police said there's no need to confront him, leave him alone. So the idea that, Trayvon was and is an example of fear that Black people feel, that when they're out in public, they can be assaulted or attacked. They're being questioned about what space they're being in. And if their response isn't one that's docile, right, which means very timid, they could end up dead. Even if you're being timid, you could end up dead. So it's also juxtaposed with the idea that why can't he be angry? If you or I were, if you're out walking and you're minding your own business and someone tries to tell you you don't belong here, wouldn't you be angry? Shouldn't you have the right to express that anger? Right, so the anxiety of being Black in North America, this is on page 111, right? And it starts to cause physical and psychological distress. Gastritis. She starts feeling pains in her stomach. She starts going to her doctor. She starts talking about the fact that she's feeling worse. And she's drinking more, which also leads to stomach issues, which is heightening her physical distress, right? So remember I've talked about the fact that racism, and attorney connects these things, that racism is a mental and physical health issue. We're talking about individuals who feel under stress, feel that when they enter into a situation, there are threats around them. And that heightened level of stress, your body can't take for long periods of time, right? You can be stressed out for a little periods of time, you can be stressed here and there, but if you're constantly under stress, you're going to start having an effect on you. And with Eternity, she finds that she's physically feeling ill. She's more afraid to go out because she's afraid that things are going to happen to her. So both these things are adding up, right? Eternity mentions that in her interview, that racism leads to other things like hypertension, like anxiety, heightened anxiety. You stop doing your work. She notices that her grades start to slip because she's super hyper focused on and stressed out. She talks about having poor eating habits and not eating well because, again, when you're stressed, you're trying to relieve that stress. So sometimes we do it through food, sometimes we do it through alcohol, sometimes we do it through sex. She's kind of doing all these things, trying to relieve something, right? She talks about nightlife as a space for white males and dangerous for anyone else. And this is on pages 113, 115. And this is just, look out for this thing. She talks about the fact that she says that these are spaces where young white men can participate in, because of their privilege, again, their ability to do things without the consequences of their behavior, that they can act in ways that are racist or are dangerous, and there's no consequences to this, right? She says, for example, of white privilege, the behavior of a white person as an individual trait, while the behavior of people of color is a collective trait, 115 to 116. Attorney chooses to distance herself from nightlife to have some control. So again, she's talking about the fact that that behavior of being rude or doing something is a privilege in which white people have that people of color cannot. So they're saying as a person of color can't have a meltdown in a store, because they do, something's going to happen to them. And if they don't, so therefore have to remain calm, where a person who is white can have a meltdown because they know that they're not going to be held accountable for that behavior. I don't know if you've all seen the video, the one happened last year. It's we've all talked about we've called on the internet Karens, women having or people having meltdowns when they're confronted with told not to do, and then wanting to do something. There was the one, Amy Cooper, the famous one, where she was in a dog park A gentleman asked her to please leave the dog park because she's not supposed to be there. And then she got upset and angry, and they got into a confrontation, and she said, I'm going to call the police on you. I'm going to tell them that the African-American man is coming after me. She was on the phone. She was ranting and raving. She was dragging her dog, and she was saying that he was threatening her, and he wasn't. He was videotaping her, and he's remaining calm while she's calling the police on him. Lots of people got upset with that video because the situation was that in that situation, that man could have ended up dead. The police showed up thinking that he was a threat. There is a history of police acting disproportionately violent towards people of color, especially Black men, when there's a belief there's a threat. So the idea that she can act in a certain way without consequence is a privilege. I might show you a video as an example of that to sort of key in what that privilege is on YouTube that happened recently, and we can talk a little bit about it. But again, attorney chooses to distance herself from that, to have some control, because she's starting to figure out that this is not good for her mental health or physical health, and she's got to find ways to feel safe, right? We've all heard the term, this is a safe space. This is an idea that safe space isn't just a trendy term that people use to describe something. Safe space is about the idea that I can exist in this area without fear of threat from other people. And I don't have to be worried about being accosted or assaulted by those individuals. Okay, so that's the end of this part of the PowerPoint. So I'm just going to end the slideshow for now. And what I'm going to do is show you something, and I want your response to this. Hopefully I can. Okay, so all see this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I wanted you to watch this video as an example of what Turning Me says, that there's this idea that people are allowed to, a white person is allowed to react in a certain way where other people aren't, and a person of color has to remain calm. So this is just an interpretation of a video that's been, gone viral. I'm going to show it to you, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. You should be able to hear it.
Okay. No.
Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Yep. It's you. It's you. Now you are. Oh my God. Oh my God. Do you see this? Oh my God. I never thought nothing like this would happen to me. She just tried to run and hit me. And now she. Did you see her?
This may be the craziest Karen video we've ever come across.
She tried to hit me. Ask your workers. She tried to hit me. She tried to hit me. Now I want security for you. Oh my God. Oh my God. You should have thought about that before you did what you did.
The vid speaks for itself, as we all do know.
No, why don't she walk away from me?
Notice how Karen tries cozying up to her allies at checkout.
I'm sorry. You keep lying saying I'm threatening you, so I'm recording to protect myself.
After charging at someone, playing the victim in a situation she created by herself.
You cut. Look at this.
Get away from me!
Oh, y'all better get this lady.
Get away from me!
You gonna.
Get-
You look at this.
Get
Security.
Get the fuck out! Get
Security. Look at this. Yes. Can y'all
the Get her away from me! Get her away from me!
Lord have mercy.
Stop threatening me!
See, and she's saying I'm threatening her. I'm not saying nothing to her. It's to protect me. Once the law get here, who they gonna believe? Her white ass or my black ass?
This person's threatening me. She's recording me. She has poor purple hair. Just put the phone down.
She's lying on the phone. Don't tell me what to do. She said I threatened her. Well, I don't give a fuck about her being sick. I'm worried about me. You hear this?
Guys, this is insane. But just wait, it gets worse.
I just came to get a free panty, that's all. See what these people do? They call in a panic and tell the police that you doing something to them when you clearly saw her chase me around the store. She's telling them, get here, I'm helping, my heart's racing. Look. Oh, see, did you see that? That's how they be getting us killed. You see this?
We do.
People are trying to help her and ask her to step out the store. Of course I'm not helping you. Why would I help you? You trying to hurt me. You see this?
Come here now. I'm feeling threatened.
It's Amy Cooper 2.0. So here's where security and the cops fail the victim.
She screamed, she chased me. As a matter of fact, where is she?
Well, I don't know exactly right now who you're referring to.
Here we go.
The cops finally arrive, and here's how they treat the victim.
I don't work for the mall. I can't order her out of the
Yeah, but you work for Milburn. I was just almost assaulted in this mall. The manager already said she tried to attack me. I want her to leave the mall.
Even with video evidence, Karen lies.
No, she should be escorted out the mall. She tried to attack me twice. You doing that because she white and she crying. I am nowhere near her. I don't have to move. I'm not breaking any laws. Now you get so aggressive with me. Get aggressive like that with her.
Totally fair criticism. The victim then records herself at the police station with the police report and records the exchange she has with an officer who gives her a ton of crap.
You're asking me why I'm complaining on your officers, and I'm telling you I can show you a video, and you're telling me you don't want to see the video.
I don't want to hear from your mouth.
I was in the mall. Basically, they didn't protect me. They didn't try to make from the woman that attacked me and chased me around the store. They didn't ask her to leave or anything. They said they weren't able to. They weren't able to ask her to leave the mall. I've never heard of such a thing. Because if I was chasing her around the store, I'm sure I would have been asked to leave the mall and or arrested. I showed him the video.
Why do you believe that?
What you mean why I don't believe that? Because
Why do you believe that?
okay, I don't want to play this game again today. You know, this happened to me Saturday. I'm very emotional about it.
The victim is asking for donations to help in her case against Karen. She has surpassed her $20,000 goal, but the contributions should keep coming in. I have a very, very good feeling Elphick will not be going away quietly. I mean, look at her rampage in the store. It was anything but.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Why is that? Why is that video kind of representative when the attorney? When I'm talking about attorney, he talks about the idea of white privilege and white people being able to act any way they want in certain spaces. What is that? How's that connected to the video I just showed you?
Even though the lady who videotaped it was the victim, she still was treated like she was the one who was attacking the lady.
Right.
Even though the white lady was attacking her, but she got treated like she was the victim.
Right. And again, the lady also says, hey, if I had acted this way, how would your response be, right? Would you be telling me to, would I have to leave the store? Would I have been arrested? Again, notice how the woman who's being attacked is being, I mean, she's calm. She's like, I'm recording this because if I don't, you're not going to believe me. Right. So this is what attorney sort of draws our attention to, and what he's talking about, the idea of privilege. I'm going to stop the share here. The idea of privilege and the idea of spaces and being safe. That attorney knows that she cannot behave the way that woman behaved, where she cried, fell to the ground, fainted, started screaming, again, chased her twice. And she goes, I can't do anything. All right. While the woman who's being assaulted has to remain calm, can't be emotional, even though, and listen to the woman who's saying, I'm really emotional right now and I'm very upset. She's still calm, right? Because her fear is that if I'm not calm, if I act in a certain way, the response from the police is going to be violent. right? Or they're going to dismiss what I'm saying. So this is a thing that attorney sort of talks about and goes through. She talks about this several times in the book. I wanted to give you an example of that happening. Again, it's called Amy Cooper 2.0. If you don't know who Amy Cooper is, I would invite you to look up the video in which a similar thing happens where, again, a person of color, a Black person, is recording themselves, recording the situation, and they're doing it because they're saying, if I don't record this and have information to show you, you won't believe me, right? And then look at how the police respond and how they respond to her, where it's almost like, well, you did something to get her upset, and like, well, okay, but she shouldn't be assaulting me, and why is it not being treated the same way? So just something to remember and listen to, and remember when you're watching those videos. I think maybe if I have time, let me just, before I move on, let's try screen share it again. Okay, so
deaths that my best friend Taz and I.
Let's see if I can find that section, and maybe we can listen to it. Let's just double check.
Party gastritis. The first rule Taz and I learned in second year is that partying in London is always justified. There isn't much else to do in the cities, and we were a duo, known as the niggas. We were up the street of sweat ultimate life. When strangers asked if Western was really a party school, we'd enthusiastically confirm.
Give me a second, I'm just gonna see if I can find that spot.
Though it wasn't like Joshua had. Myself, with this anger and fear that was so devastating. I wanted to be a normal functioning girl again, a carefree girl, a happy girl. I wanted to stop hurting people and myself. I wanted it to be like it was before, but there was nothing to go back to. After leaving London's Club 181 on King Street in the fall of 2002, a Black female student noticed a white man standing in front of the bar as she tried to hail a cab. She was intrigued by his shirt, decorated with skulls and writing in a language she didn't recognize. Curious, she approached him. "What does your shirt say?" she asked. His friend, another white man, came over and got in her face. "What the fuck are you talking to him for?" he yelled. Quickly, she backed away, telling them that she was leaving. They grabbed her. The man in the skull shirt punched her in the face. They walked away from her as she bled. The man in the shirt turned back around. "And the shirt says, 'I hate motherfucking niggers.'" 10 years later, just a few blocks away, Taz and I were outside Jack's after a night out looking for a cab. Two white men were standing at the side of the building smoking a cigarette when they started hitting on her, following us as we walked down the street. Taz tried to turn them down politely. "We just want to talk to you. What's wrong with that?" One of the men, muscular with a blonde crop, said as he grabbed her arm. She was losing her self-confidence in the face of their aggression. I stepped in. "Can you leave her alone? She's not interested." "No one is talking to you. We're talking to your friend," he said harshly in his Eastern European accent. "Well, she doesn't want to talk to you. You can see she's uncomfortable." I put my hand on Taz's back to guide her away. He let go of her arm and turned towards me, inches from my face. His laughing friend half-heartedly held him back. "Why don't you go back to your third world country, bitch?" he yelled at me. I yelled something back about the irony of a white man with an accent telling me to go back to some nondescript place when I was born here. "I should beat you up for even daring to speak to me." He came closer as Taz guided me towards home. They followed us, still threatening me. I couldn't show them my fear. They walked behind us for a few blocks before turning around and heading south. 10 years separated these incidents. 10 minutes was the distance between where they happened. And in their eerie similarities, it was as if nothing had changed at all.
Okay, so that's an example of almost share there. So again, why is that? So I wanted to give that little excerpt because I want you to hear that sort of example of the stress, right? Now imagine yourself, you're off to university, you're enjoying your life, and that happens on a consistent basis where it's not just an single incident. Again, in the book, she talks about it happened several times. How would you feel? Oh, sorry, Petra, can't hear you. You kind of grumbled there.
Oh, I didn't say anything yet.
Okay.
How do we feel about this thing?
Yeah, how would you feel? Like, would you feel safe?
Not really.
Right. You wouldn't feel safe. I wouldn't feel safe. And again, that's something that happens all the time to her. So you can see how that adds up and adds up and adds up. And again, think of the guy that actually beat you to your face. He followed them home. He was following them home. And that's happening all the time. And even when she talks about that, the thing, we're not talking to you, we're talking to your friend. We want to talk to your friend. And again, the way they grab her. This is something where she talks about one, the feeling of being where we're not listening to you, stay out of it. And also the idea of I can't grab your friend and assault your friend and do what I want and be threatening and no one's gonna have any consequences for me. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're reading the book, and part of it and hopefully that gets you an understanding of how she feels, right? This is the impact that she had. It's what's going on with her, that she feels on this constant threat of going out. They're partying at a school that's known for partying is now become dangerous. Okay, I'm going to stop the record. Any questions?
No.
Okay,